Ever feel like you're just completely up against a legal wall, needing to find a clear path forward when everything feels overwhelming?
Yeah, like you're lost in some kind of bureaucratic maze.
Exactly. That feeling of desperately needing clarity, that's really what we're focusing on today in this deep dive. We've been looking closely at some really important information you shared with us.
This deep dive is all about understanding the difficulties you've encountered with the legal aid system over in Israel. Specifically, we're looking at a really pressing case involving debt collection.
Right. You gave us this detailed expert report, and it really breaks down the situation. Our goal here is, to pull out the crucial insights.
To understand the core problems, what actions have been taken, and what this all means for navigating legal aid when things get tough.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The report, it immediately paints a picture of a really serious, urgent situation.
Absolutely. The urgency facing the client, and this is someone in a situation, mirroring what you might be experiencing. It's striking. We're talking active debt collection, including a warrant for his arrest issued just recently, May 15th, 2025.
Wow.
Yeah. And this isn't just some procedural thing. It's the real threat of immediate detention. Plus, seizures of his bank accounts, his vehicle, even attachments to money owed to him by other people.
That sounds incredibly stressful, just layers of pressure. And a key point the report brings up is the client's claim that he wasn't even properly served with the legal notices.
Right.
He's alleging forged signatures by the process servers and that everything was sent to the wrong address, not his official one, not where he actually lives.
And that's fundamental, isn't it? A breakdown in due process right there.
Yeah.
Proper legal notification. It's essential. You need to know you're being sued to have a fair chance to respond.
Of course.
So if these claims, about fraudulent service and wrong addresses hold up, it could potentially undermine the whole legal basis for the debt collection.
And it's already cost him. The report says he had to pay a 2,000 NIS security deposit, NIS being new Israeli shekels, the currency there.
Right. 2,000.
Paid under pressure just to avoid being arrested right then and there. So facing this urgent threat, already out of pocket, it makes total sense he turned to the Ministry of Justice's Legal Aid Office for help. That was on May 15th.
Exactly. I mean, the legal aid system is supposed to be that lifeline for people who can't afford representation, especially when things are this urgent.
Yeah.
And it's positive, I suppose, that legal aid was approved relatively quickly. May 18th, the report says, an advocate, Sagi Yair, was appointed.
Okay, so initially it looks like the system kicked in, but this is where the story takes a really concerning turn. The report details a significant and troubling breakdown in the representation from Advocate Yair.
The allegations against Advocate Yair, they paint a picture of behavior that's, frankly, deeply unprofessional. Potentially unethical, too.
How so?
Well, the report outlines claims, starting with just a complete lack of meaningful contact after he was appointed. Then allegations of a dismissive attitude, a failure to act on this incredibly urgent debt collection case, even after getting critical information from the client.
He just didn't do anything.
Apparently not, or not effectively. And it makes you wonder, what systemic issues within the legal aid unit might let that kind of behavior go unchecked, at least at first.
That's a really important question. And the report, it includes some direct quotes from these alleged interactions. They're pretty shocking, actually.
Let's hear them.
Okay, so on May 18th, 10:44 a.m., a phone call. Advocate Yair allegedly says, quote, "This is how it will work. I talk and you shut up. Understood."
Wow. Wow.
Right. It's hard to imagine feeling any trust in a lawyer who starts off like that, especially when you're facing potential arrests.
That kind of language. From a legal professional, it's completely unacceptable. It destroys any chance of a constructive relationship right from the start.
Yeah.
Creates this demeaning dynamic.
Then the client tries to arrange meeting times via text, and the response he gets back. Just, Omer, you are confused.
Dismissive. Brushing him off. It shows a real lack of willingness to even, build a basic working relationship.
And there was another phone call that same day, May 18th, 11:22 a.m. Advocate Yair allegedly claims he owes the client nothing. He says, quote, "I am a lawyer from the state, and this is how it works. Maybe you don't understand."
That is incredibly condescending, and it kind of hints at that troubling perspective we sometimes see, doesn't it? Where the lawyer maybe sees legal aid as a favor they're doing, not a right the client has under the law.
Like it's coming out of his own pocket.
Exactly. And that attitude, it can seriously harm the quality of representation.
Then later that day, 2:13 p.m., another call, this one from Advocate Yair, allegedly ends with him hanging up saying, You are wasting my time. Until you come to the office, I have nothing to talk to you about and nothing to explain to you. Understood. That repeated, understood, feels really aggressive.
It does. It reinforces this picture of someone just unwilling to engage, unwilling to understand the client's immediate distress. Insisting on an office meeting is the only way forward, especially with an arrest warrant hanging over someone's head. It shows a severe lack of empathy and urgency.
And it gets worse. There's even an alleged implied threat. May 20th, 8:42 a.m., client gets a call from Yair. The client asks for respectful communication, and the response is, I will already update the legal aid.
Oof. Yeah, that sounds very much like a veiled threat. Given the context, it's a plausible interpretation, like, keep complaining and I'll report you or pull the plug.
Trying to silence him.
Seems like it. An attempt to shut down legitimate concerns about the quality of representation.
The report really drives home how this kind of hostile treatment can make you feel powerless.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, imagine being in that situation. It sounds like this behavior just completely obliterated any trust.
Absolutely.
Made it impossible for the client to share the sensitive info needed for his own case.
You got it. A hostile lawyer-client relationship. It fundamentally breaks down that trust, that open communication you absolutely need for effective representation.
Good.
If you feel intimidated, disrespected, you're not going to share everything. It basically sabotages your own case.
So based on all this alleged behavior, the report then digs into the specific legal and ethical violations by Advocate Yair.
And what's fascinating here is how clearly this alleged behavior just clashes with core legal and ethical principles. The report rightly points to a breach of fiduciary duty.
Fiduciary duty.
Yeah, it's a fundamental responsibility a lawyer has to act in their client's best interests with utmost loyalty, dedication, good faith. Rule 2 of the Israel Bar Association Rules of Ethics covers this loyalty, acting without fear within the law. Yair's alleged inaction and disrespect. It's just the opposite of that.
A direct conflict. And it goes further, right? It touches on violating the client's dignity, his right to access the courts. It references Rule 23 of the Ethics Rules, the Basic Law on Human Dignity and Liberty, even Supreme Court cases. How does this behavior undermine that right to access justice?
Well, think about it. Access to the courts isn't just, being allowed to file papers. It means having effective representation, a real chance to present your case fairly. There's a key case, HCJ 733897, that really affirmed this right in Israel, making sure money isn't a barrier.
Okay.
So by allegedly acting in a way that stopped the client from trusting him, from sharing vital info, Advocate Yair was effectively blocking the client's ability to have his case properly heard. It totally undermined the whole purpose of legal aid.
Which is meant to ensure access for everyone.
Precisely. The report also points out a conflict with the legal aid law itself, the 1972 law, arguing Yair acted like legal aid was some personal favor, not a fundamental right.
Yeah, we touched on that attitude.
Exactly. And it's contrary to the spirit and purpose of the law. It reinforces that problematic power dynamic.
And finally, the report mentions non-compliance with the Ministry of Justice's own procedures. Guidelines from 2018 for external lawyers working with legal aid. They apparently require respectful, accessible, professional conduct.
Correct. These guidelines exist to ensure a baseline quality and ethical standard. The alleged conduct here seems like a clear violation of those operational standards. It just keeps adding up.
Across the board, really. But unfortunately, it seems this individual behavior was maybe compounded by wider issues within the legal aid unit itself.
Yes, that's the next layer. Beyond the individual lawyer, the report points to what look like systemic failures within the legal aid unit.
How so? What did the unit do or not do?
Well, what's concerning is how the alleged problems went beyond just Advocate Yair. The report details a lack of response to urgent requests the client made between May 18th and May 23rd. He apparently tried multiple times to reach the hotline and Advocate Odelia Eliassi Levi about needing a replacement lawyer. Urgently. Nothing. Radio silence, it seems. These pleas just went unanswered initially, which, really underscores how important it is to document everything and just be persistent when you're dealing with big organizations.
Keep records of every call, every email.
Absolutely. And sometimes, shows you might need to go outside the standard channels with clear evidence to actually get a response.
And incredibly, the report says they refused to give him direct contact info for Advocate Eliassi Levi or other relevant people.
Yeah. Instead, he was told to submit written requests with a processing time of, get this, 30 working days.
30 working days for an urgent situation with an arrest warrant looming. That's absurd.
It is. It shows a complete disconnect between their administrative procedures and the reality the clients are facing. A 30-day turnaround for replacing a non-responsive lawyer in a case like this. It's just unacceptable. Undermines the whole point of timely aid.
There's also this anecdote about a hotline representative named Itara. She apparently excused the lack of email response by saying they get 2,000 emails a day. And the report notes the client's pretty logical counter. If email is the sole means of contact, as they implied, that kind of backlog makes it useless for anything urgent.
That's a very fair point.
Yeah.
If you rely that heavily on email, you need systems to prioritize urgent stuff. Volume can't be an excuse for neglecting critical situations. It suggests maybe a need for better triage, better resource allocation in their comms channels.
The report then contrasts all this with the official contact channels listed on the Ministry of Justice website, which include online forms, email, regular mail, phone hotlines, even scheduled phone reception times.
Right, so there's a big gap between the advertised accessibility and what the client actually experienced, which raises questions, doesn't it, about how accurate or effective that public information really is.
If the channels don't work or aren't used properly for urgent cases, it's a barrier.
And crucially, the report points out the website even advertises information for urgent cases after hotline hours. It lists dedicated emergency phone numbers for each district, including Tel Aviv. The number listed is 073-392-3760.
An emergency number.
Exactly, which directly contradicts the 30-day response time claim and the apparent lack of urgency shown here. It's like there are emergency procedures on the books that just weren't used or offered.
So the system exists, but it failed in practice here.
It appears that way. The existence of those numbers suggests they know some cases need immediate attention. The failure to use them here points to a significant systemic breakdown. Maybe internal protocols aren't clear or staff aren't trained on them.
Okay, so the report then moves to analyze the role of this advocate Odelia Eliassi-Levi and this rather cynical note that appeared later.
Yeah, the timing here is interesting. Advocate Eliassi-Levi seems to have only stepped in after the client made a very assertive phone call on May 27th. The call where he basically read his entire complaint letter out loud.
So the initial urgent pleas weren't enough. It took that direct, forceful approach.
It seems that way, which led to this note in the new appointment letter, the one for the replacement lawyer, Advocate Ezra Sig, issued that same day, May 27th.
What did the note say?
It reads, and I'm quoting roughly from the report's description, "Standing to be replaced, beyond the letter of the law and at the request of Adve Sagier, it was decided to replace your representation. Your attention is drawn to the fact that you are obligated to speak and behave respectfully and honorably. Messages such as, 'You are confused, insolent,' are not acceptable."
Wow. There is a lot going on in that short note. Beyond the letter of the law.
Telling, isn't it? It suggests the replacement wasn't necessarily because Yair did anything wrong, according to them, but maybe as a favor to advocate Yair at his request. It really makes you question if they properly investigated the client's complaints at all.
Or just wanted the problem to go away.
Possibly. And then it pivots, right?
Yeah.
It puts the blame squarely on the client, tells him to behave respectfully, and references unacceptable language like, "You are confused, insolent."
But wait, the report says the client claims that was Advocate Yair's sarcastic remark to him.
Exactly. So it really does look like a lack of independent investigation. They seem to be taking Advocate Yair's version, or their interpretation of it, at face value, and then reprimanding the client for language he says was used against him.
It feels like adding insult to injury. It undermines trust even further. And imagine how it might discourage other clients from speaking up if they think they'll just get blamed.
Precisely. So the report really hammers home these systemic failures. It summarizes the client's feeling, describing dealing with the unit as a war of attrition and detached conduct.
A war of attrition, that's powerful, and seems to fit the experience, resistance, delays, lack of empathy.
And the failure to address the urgency, even with those emergency channels supposedly in place, it just underscores that detachment.
And the lack of accountability in handling complaints seems pretty evident too, right? From that accusatory note, the delays.
That's a crucial point. If there aren't effective ways to hold lawyers and the unit itself accountable for misconduct or negligence, public trust just evaporates. If people think complaints aren't taken seriously or met with defensiveness, why would they bother? Or even seek help in the first place?
Okay, so the report then pivots. It looks at the client's own actions and their strategic value in all this, which is quite interesting.
Yeah, what's remarkable is how proactive and strategic the client was, even facing this incredibly difficult situation. The report highlights how he meticulously drafted that detailed complaint letter, He didn't just vaguely complain, he cited specific legal and ethical rules.
Showing he'd done his homework.
Absolutely. Demonstrates real legal awareness and a determination to articulate his grievances very clearly.
And the way he presented the letter was also very deliberate, wasn't it? Claiming he sent it twice, then reading it verbatim on that phone call to Atara.
That was a smart move. Very astute. By reading it aloud, he bypassed any potential email backlog delays. He forced them to hear it, acknowledge it, and importantly, get it documented in real time by the hotline rep.
He made it impossible to ignore.
Pretty much. And look at the impact. The report notes this led to a surprisingly fast response. Atara summarized it, promised to tell Advocate Eliassi Levi personally, and boom, within hours, confirmation that Advocate Yair would be replaced as soon as possible.
So, cutting through the bureaucracy with direct, informed, assertive communication actually worked.
It certainly seemed to in this instance. It highlights the power of that approach, especially when you ground it in understanding your rights.
Right.
The client's proactivity effectively bypassed the systemic delays and got him the immediate result he needed, a new lawyer.
Now, the report does touch on the fact that claiming the letter was sent earlier might involve, a slight misrepresentation.
A delicate point, ethically.
But it argues that given the context, the systemic failures, maybe that tactic was, necessary to force action when the normal channels were clearly failing him.
It's a tough ethical consideration. But the report makes a valid point. When you're facing an urgent crisis and hitting bureaucratic brick walls, people might feel they have to take unconventional steps to protect their rights. Honesty is ideal, always, but a system that's unresponsive to urgent needs, it complicates the picture.
The report acknowledges the small risk, that this could maybe be used later to question his credibility, but it suggests the urgent need probably outweighed that risk in his mind at the time.
Ultimately, his main goal was getting effective legal help, fast, and his actions achieved that. The potential downside might have seemed like a reasonable trade-off in such a high-stakes situation.
Okay, so now we get to the really proactive part. The report lays out this world chess champion approach, a multifaceted strategy moving forward, starting with how to best work with the new advocate, Ezra Sigg.
Right, this is where we shift from analysis to concrete steps. First thing, engage effectively with Advocate Ezra Sigg. The report stresses reviewing the new appointment letter. Check the contact details. Note the 3-month deadline for contact. But the advice is clear. Contact him immediately.
Yeah, strike while the iron's hot, right? Don't wait. And provide him with everything.
Everything. A complete info package, the original appointment letter for Yair, the new one for Sigg, and crucially, that detailed complaint letter the client wrote. Advocate Sigg needs the full context of what happened before.
Makes sense.
The report also recommends sharing all the communication records, call logs, texts with Yair, call logs, details of that key call with Atara from legal aid. Full transparency.
Let the new lawyer see the whole picture. And explain the timeline. Emphasize the urgency.
Definitely. Explain the whole chronology. Make sure Advocate Sigg understands the pressure, the arrest warrant, the seizures, the fraudulent service claims. He needs to grasp the urgency.
And what about that cynical note in the appointment letter? Should he bring that up?
Yes. The report specifically advises discussing it with Advocate Sigg. Make sure Sigg understands the client's perspective on that note, understands the history with the legal aid unit. It helps build trust from the start. And finally, establish clear communication expectations together. Frequency, methods, proactive steps on the actual debt case.
Okay, so that's managing the new relationship, but the strategic plan goes further, right? Formal complaints.
Yes, a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
It's about both individual accountability and trying to push for systemic improvement. First, a formal, detailed complaint against Advocate Sagi Yair himself.
To who?
To the Ethics Committee of the Bar Association. Leverage that letter the client already wrote. Emphasize the breaches, Rule 2 on loyalty, Rule 23 on respect, the spirit of the legal aid law, basic law on human dignity. Include the evidence, call logs, texts, the letter itself.
And the goal there.
Disciplinary action, a warning, a fine, suspension, maybe even disbarment or removal from the legal aid list. Accountability for his alleged actions.
Okay, and complaint number 2.
That one goes against the legal aid unit and Advocate Odelia Eliassi Levi. This is filed with the Public Complaints Commissioner at the Ministry of Justice, the body that handles complaints against government entities.
And what's the focus there?
The systemic failures. Detail the lack of response to urgent requests, refusing direct contact info, the 30-day processing time excuse, the 2,000 emails thing, the unused emergency numbers, and definitely that accusatory, cynical note in the new appointment letter that suggests bias and lack of investigation. Again, include all the evidence.
And the goal of that complaint.
An institutional investigation. Get them to look at their own communication protocols, how they handle emergencies, how they handle complaints internally, and some accountability for the tone and implications of that note.
Makes sense. Address the lawyer and the system. The plan also talks about actually fighting the debt case itself, right, with the new lawyer.
Absolutely critical. The immediate priority with Advocate SIG is to challenge that alleged fraudulent service and the incorrect address. That's key to trying to overturn the arrest warrant and reverse the seizures.
Get the immediate pressure off.
Exactly. And the report stresses Advocate SIG needs to look at all the client's rights under the execution law. That's the law governing debt enforcement in Israel. Could there be a paid-off claim? The rejection to execution of a bill, possibilities for payment orders, maybe declaring the client a debtor with limited means, consolidating cases.
Lots of potential avenues.
Depending on the specifics, yeah.
Yeah.
Also exploring things like canceling travel bans, suspending imprisonment proceedings, maybe even discharge. The key is proactive engagement with the Haifa Enforcement Office, where the case is.
Okay. And finally, the report mentions looking at the bigger picture. Systemic responsibility.
Yeah, a longer-term view. It suggests considering a Freedom of Information request to the Ministry of Justice. Try to get insights into their internal protocols for urgent cases, replacing lawyers, handling complaints.
Shine a light on how things are supposed to work.
Exactly. And as a last resort, if the formal complaints don't really yield results, the report mentions potentially contacting media outlets to highlight the systemic issues and push for reform. But that's a step to be considered very carefully, probably in coordination with Advocate SIG.
Right. Could have other implications. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's really clear this case, this whole situation you've navigated, it's significant. It really highlights the fundamental importance of protecting civil rights, ensuring access to justice.
And upholding really high ethical standards in the legal profession, especially for public bodies like legal aid.
Absolutely. The case seems to have exposed both alleged serious misconduct by an individual lawyer and some significant systemic shortcomings within the legal aid unit itself.
And those failures have real-world consequences, don't they, for vulnerable people just trying to get the legal help they're entitled to.
But, you know, the report also emphasizes the strategic and ultimately effective actions taken by the client. His proactivity, even when facing all this, is pretty remarkable.
It really is. His detailed documentation, his assertive communication, they played a crucial role in forcing a response. It really underscores the importance of being informed, documenting everything, being persistent.
Even when dealing with big, sometimes unresponsive systems, it shows maybe you can make things happen even if you have to push hard or go outside standard channels.
Indeed. It highlights that individuals need to be empowered to advocate for their rights, even when it feels like climbing a mountain.
So the main recommendations are clear. Really leverage that new representation with Advocate SIG.
Yep.
Pursue those formal complaints against both Advocate Yair and the legal aid unit.
Hold them accountable.
Aggressively address the underlying debt collection case itself. Get that sorted.
The immediate fire.
And consider those broader advocacy efforts for systemic change down the line.
By taking these steps, the client isn't just fighting his own battle. He's potentially contributing to making the system better for others, too.
So for you listening, this deep dive really brings up a big question, doesn't it? How do we make sure that these systems, the ones designed to help the most vulnerable, are actually effective and accountable? It really makes you think about the power of understanding your rights, advocating for yourself, even when the odds seem completely stacked against you. And maybe, just maybe, how individual experiences like this, shared and acted upon, can actually drive meaningful improvements in access to justice for everyone. Definitely something to keep mulling over.